Michael O'Connell, who was then director of the Basilica of St. Mary, has a very, very strong interfaith life and a very strong connection with Temple Israel. And I knew him because he was parish priest at St. Cecilia's, where we go to church. And then he left and went to the heard about the Three Hermits and Pilgrim's Hymn. And he wanted to make a major statement. This was 2005. It was the 60th year of the liberation of the death camps. It was the 40th anniversary of the Vatican document Nostra Aetate in Our Time, which absolved Jews from the old accusation of being responsible for the death of Christ. And so Michael wanted to make a major statement of solidarity with the Jewish community. And he said, I don't want the children to go into the 21st century not alert or re-alerted to the horrors of the Shoah and the reality of that. And so he commissioned his work from us as a gift from the Christian community to the Jewish community in the Twin Cities, with a special focus on the Basilica of St. Mary and Temple Israel. One of Michael's favorite words is bashert, which means meant to be, or it's in the cards. And I think we all worked hard to make this happen, but there was an element of bashert, I think, that it was a convergence that was meant to happen. This is a public domain photograph. We've tried to trace the origins. We think it's the children in Theresienstadt. As I said, deceptively looking, nicely clothed and happy, but that was all a sham. And it's the last of 6 slides we see in the work, at the end of the testimony of Hindergeburt. I have lived in a world with no children. I would never live in a world of no children again. And we hear the strains of the beautiful Behafta, and then this appears. And it's an extraordinary moment. Those hopeful and doomed faces of the children. And picking up on Father Michael, what I said was, in a program note, the faces of the children are the sun, moon, and stars of this work. They are the center. So that's been very powerful for both of us. Stephen's got it there by the piano. I keep it in my study.
Some of the discussions we had, I think I sort of played devil's advocate, because I said, there are the radicals who think the Holocaust didn't happen, and we're not sure what planet they're living on, but take that just off the table. But there are other people who, and I knew of this, who would say, well, I wasn't there, I'm not responsible, and why? And so I sort of played that role with Michael. I said, well, how do we, we're apologizing for everybody, and some people might say, no need to apologize for me, I had nothing to do with it. And say, well, you're buying into it by virtue of buying into your faith in a way. I guess, I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but gradually we talked ourselves around to how to say things in a way that made people, I thought, between the words and the music, buy into the idea that there's a collective responsibility here, and it needs to be acknowledged and apologized for. And that also made the music easier to write. But I had to be able to defend several points of view in order to write the music unabashedly. And once we had several talks where there was no music written and there wasn't really any libretto discussed. It was just like general things. I read a lot of books about the Holocaust, some I reread from years earlier, and Michael had done a lot of reading, a ton of reading.
Well, I knew I couldn't write this. It was too large, but I like to quote Samuel Beckett, who says, I can't go on, comma, I'll go on. So I kept writing, and I always accumulate a lot of unusable ideas. Theodore Ricky says when you go dredging in the river, the great American poet, you're going to bring up a bunch of gunk with the good stuff, if there's good stuff. So I had lots of ideas and ran them by Stephen, ran them by the little committee with Marsha Zimmerman and Michael and others at the Basilica. I had one idea of ending the oratorio, and Marsha Zimmerman said, I don't think so. There were some quite good vetoes of some very bad ideas. I just, I brainstormed and I read books like Liturgies of the Holocaust, what seemed to work and not work in liturgies that get performed regularly with different communities to commemorate, like at Yom HaShoah and so forth. But the key thing was, when I went to the Holocaust Museum with a group from the Basilica and Temple Israel, and I saw this amazing three-story tier of photographs from the people in the village, I can't pronounce it, forgive me, who were massacred by the Nazis, but all their old photographs were gathered together here. And I saw the photographs just in that area too by Roman Vishniak. And I said to Stephen, I think that the faces of the children must be at the center of the work. I didn't have a metaphor at the time. So I just accumulated many, many drafts and had some strong discussions with Stephen. We had some, you know, interesting composer librettist moments there. And at one point, toward the end, he found my structure too stolid and said it must be more helical. So did we cut and paste? Yeah. Scissors and, you know, scotch taped and a little bit the way Hermit's is with its alternations of liturgy and so forth and the soloists. I'm not sure I'm being articulate. I overwrote incredibly, rather desperate to find a way into this enormous work because the pressure was huge. This is a Christian gift being performed in the Basilica with the Minnesota Orchestra, etc., etc. You want it to be good, quite good.
Gradually, I began to see things merging together. There were other questions which were significant, but I said, well, we need major sections so that people can get their hands around this section's about this, and this one, all these little bits are about that, whether it's the adult chorus, the children's chorus, or the orchestra playing. This is about that, and then there's this part. And it sort of fell into three things, and I think I did kind of say, well, the first part is kind of about renewal, because I had a teshuvah, yeah. the idea of somehow starting anew, which meant acknowledging the wrongs of the past, and that's another discussion. But, and then in the middle, partly because of this postcard that Michael had of these pictures from taken by Roman Vishniak of this Polish village that was annihilated. Well, this is kind of like remembrance, you know, this whole area like that. And then somewhere along the line we got the idea of projecting the images of the actual photos that Michael was writing about with, you know, kids or a grandfather and a grandson and everything. And so these were like little musical or sonic snapshots, but accompanying these visual images that were projected on scrims. And then the last one became visions, the idea of Christians and Jews, or Christians and other people, or Jews and other people walking together hand in hand. And with three big sections like that, you know, people think pretty well in tripartite forms, and a triangle or a tripod is a pretty stable structure. So then it seemed to sort of have its own swim and pull to me, and it became easier to write and to justify, now I'm going to this section. Why? Because it relates to this big concept, and I thought people could really relate to that. This phrase appears, I think I got this right, first time it happens is sung by the cantor in Hebrew, and it's sort of kind of like pulls you up short. All of a sudden this cantor sings in Hebrew in this work that's being sung principally by a chorus representing Christians, speaks this thing, and it's a moment of stop you dead in your tracks. And later on, the chorus sings it in German, which also is kind of shocking, because what's German doing in a work like this? But there's a purpose to it, you know. It's like, it's stating this is where, quote, the other side is coming from. And eventually then the chorus and the cantor join towards the end to sing it all together in Hebrew, which, you know, it sounds pedantic or pedagogical or whatever, but it's not attempting to teach anything really. It's just sort of showing a movement of people as they gravitate, perhaps throughout the performance of the work, perhaps towards rehearsing it and getting to the final moment of performance. And I came up with a tune for it, right? It wasn't something I stole from it.
Not only a beautiful, beautiful tune, which everybody loves, but I had written this hymn of the eternal flame. I remember writing it on a clipboard while I was driving down to Red Wing. You don't need to know, writing this thing.
Somehow you've been talking on your cell phone, less dangerous.
Well, yes. But somehow Stephen managed, with a little bit of pruning, to fit those words to this already established melody, and it works as the hymn. It's just extraordinary. I don't know how he does these things. But it was very important that you cast the runes. Very important that there be a transformational element, that an hour from the beginning we needed to be in a different place. And otherwise you just have this documentary feeling, you're just talking about the horrors that were done, but no redemptive or progressive elements to it. And of course this is a post-Holocaust oratorio that doesn't go into what happened in the camps, except by implication. I have no credentials to go there. It's an abyss. It's what they call a surd, S-U-R-D. There's no why to it. It just is some incredible calamity.
Well, also, I didn't want to write a work like that.
No.
I mean, it's been done. Why, you know, you can recount atrocities, and okay, I have to write some really angular, ugly music, and people sit and listen to it. And people have heard about that. You say, well, they can't hear enough. That's why the stories get repeated and all that. But, you know, do something new for a change, and go a different place. And I think the work is very much geared towards a healing sentiment. Yes. Acknowledgement first, then memory. You have to remember, and then, you know, what are the visions of hope for the future. You've had all these words, and wonderful words, but you need some time to just reflect before you progress to the next thing and the next section. But before that, the chorus and the children's chorus sing was Hymn to the Eternal Flame. I thought, this is a little too emotionally laden to just like move on. Next part is this, folks. So it was a wonderful opportunity to do something just with strings, and as Mike was saying, people are lighting candles, so it's the visual effect in the church when they're able to do that. I guess someplace they've had, little lights or something, because the fire code is you can't use.
You couldn't have actual lights.
But in this case, for the premiere, they could have candles, and that's a reflective moment as the light all comes up and you see everybody, their faces and the candlelight and everything. The work ends with this a D flat. It could end on a nice D flat major chord, but the lower basses and cellos keep going down a tritone to the G below the D flat. That's maybe way too technical, but the idea is that okay, we've come this distance, we've spent an hour singing about this problem, we've got visions of hope, and everything's wonderful, except if anyone reads a newspaper today or looks on their iPhone, it's not wonderful, not yet. And it's my way of acknowledging in a sort of just a subtle little way with a couple of intervals that my own opinion is it's not resolved. It's an ongoing problem.
As you write, as you're in the process, it generates things you could never have anticipated. It's like when you go out at night and see a half a dozen stars. When you develop night vision, you see thousands of stars. So as you write, you get an idea. The writing is smarter than we are, you know, and it generates its own discoveries that, if you could anticipate, wouldn't be what you want. There's a poem by Randall Jarrell has this line, a line or two in it. If I can think of it, it's not what I want. Meaning that, I mean, you do have concepts and titles ahead of, but the essence to me usually comes by way of the friction of the pen on the paper or as you write. And Stephen had so many good ideas in this piece that I think came as he worked on it.